Super Mario Bros. Is a video game, but it can also be a video player. Wait, what does that mean? And how is that even possible? This is a project that was done by YouTuber and game developer 100th Coin, where by using just the game, an NES, a controller, and a whole lot of free time, he was able to manipulate the game to play a music video within the actual game itself. It's done using a process known as arbitrary code execution. Now there's a chance you've heard me talk about this before, where I first covered Ace exploits in Super Mario World and Zelda Ocarina of Time, to be able to do things they were never programmed to do. And then with Super Mario Sunshine, where I broke down how people were able to use this manipulation to beat the game much quicker, and on real hardware to boot. While this method of turning Super Mario Bros. On the NES into a media player is not much different, using glitches and knowledge of how the game works internally, 100th Coin is able to put the game into a weird state so that he can write code in the game using just a controller, allowing for total control over Super Mario Bros., which grants him the ability to do anything within the limits of the NES hardware. But it's how this ace is performed that sets it apart from the others, and today I'll try to simplify how it's done, so that hopefully just about anyone watching this video can understand what exactly is going on here. One of the main things that sets this arbitrary code execution apart from the others is that it not only uses Super Mario Bros., but also an additional game, so that Super Mario Bros. Can be manipulated through total control. In this case, Super Mario Bros. 3 is used. In addition, 100th Coin had already used tools to make a perfect playthrough, known as a tool-assisted speedrun of Super Mario Bros. 3, where he exploited a bug in the game that allowed it to be beaten in about 1/5 of a second. Yeah, that's right, 1/5 of a second. This exploit in Super Mario Bros. 3 uses only button presses, or inputs, from the NES controller, which are made through using special NES emulator tools like slowing the game down frame by frame and save states, where you can go right back to a certain point in the game if you make a mistake. And when there's enough precise inputs made, the game can be altered literally upon startup. Basically, the game was over before it started. Though what does playing Super Mario Bros. 3 have to do with the original Super Mario Bros.? Well, by performing what is known as a hot swap, where you quickly swap out games before the NES has time to clear its memory, otherwise known as RAM. Those values left in RAM from one game can stay there while you're playing another. In this instance, Super Mario Bros. 3 leaves behind some memory values in the console while you're playing Super Mario Bros. By doing this, the original game starts out in World N? Now in Super Mario Bros., there are supposed to only be 8 worlds, though it's known that there are ways to access glitched worlds with their own unique levels that were never really programmed in. These bizarre levels are the result of the game reading random data from the cartridge. World N-2 is a Bowser level, specifically a copy of the final level, World 8-4. And by collecting a fire flower from the previous level, you can kill him. Though normally at this point, the game would crash. However, in this tool-assisted speedrun by 100th Coin, it instead cuts right into a black and white music video. So with the technology of the NES being as limited and dated as it is, how is it possible for it to play a full video, complete with audio as well? To understand that, we first need to know how we got here in the first place. So as I mentioned, Bowser was killed in World N-2 using a fire flower. When you kill Bowser in the normal worlds with a fire flower, he'll typically turn into a different enemy. What initially started as a small bug by Nintendo became part of the game's lore, where most of the Bowsers are really just his minions in disguise, whereas World 8's Bowser is truly him. While in the other glitched worlds, killing him will turn him into other things that aren't just enemies. But in some worlds, he'll turn into objects that'll mess with the game, causing it to crash. These could be manipulated to assume total control over Super Mario Bros., though most of them would be much more challenging to actually gain control over. Now what happens when World N's Bowser is burnt is that he turns into a specific object, and this object will start a chain reaction of many complicated events inside the console, so that the console's program counter, which I've referred to in past videos as an instruction pointer, which is a special section of the console's CPU that can quickly tell the console what to do next, is instead telling the console to run instructions from the NES's memory, or RAM, rather than from the game itself. Once this program counter is reading from RAM, since RAM can have values written to it by doing very specific things in the game, that can open up the door to total control, in this instance playing the music video. Because of the stuff that was done first in Super Mario Bros. 3, if you remember, that left some values hanging around in RAM. So not only did that Super Mario Bros. 3 stuff start the original Super Mario Bros. In World End, it also allowed for the original game to read button presses that were coming from the controller, as if they were code from the game. This button press reading would only start in Super Mario Bros. Once Bowser was burnt to a crisp in World End. Now everything that's been done so far is just to lay the groundwork for what the topic of this video is, playing a music video inside this original copy of Super Mario Bros. Now first things first, what is this music video? It's called Bad Apple, a fan-made remix and video of a song from a Japanese shoot-'em-up game called the Toho Project. Long story short, this game inspired a world of fan creations, which eventually led to a fully produced remix of this Toho song. So now, how do you take a video like this and cram it into the game using just controller inputs? Well, in a nutshell, you'd need to copy the raw data of the video by pressing certain buttons at specific times with those emulator tools, with these controller inputs matching the data exactly. But the technology of the NES is rather limited, and you'd just be using one controller to perform inputs to essentially stream this video to the NES, similar to how you'd stream data when watching Netflix or YouTube, for example. Because inputs would need to be made to tell the console what to display on screen, you'd have to write code with the controller for each frame of video, and since you can only perform so many inputs in the time it takes to display a video frame, the video itself couldn't be too graphically advanced, and thus the music video would need to be shrunk down and compressed to meet these limitations. To make this feasible, 100th Coin had the idea of converting the video's graphics to use only the game's individual sprites, basically the 2D images that make up all the graphics in the game, as you would otherwise not be able to make brand new graphics. Since the NES is also very limited in colors, the fact that Bad Apple is only in black and white helps make the converted video a lot more visually understandable. This was done by first writing a program on his computer to go through each frame of the video and compare groups of each video pixel to what the visually closest sprite would be. Again, keep in mind as well that due to hardware limitations, the video was shrunk down from this larger square 1080p video down to just a ninth of the original size. It may not look pretty, but hey, it's functional. These converted frames would then get packaged into one file, and now that it's been converted and compressed, it can be written into RAM using only controller inputs. But wait a second, if you're just funneling inputs in for the video, what about the audio? How is that done? Well, it's not quite the same as video. Audio is a little more flexible. Normal audio that you'd hear on streaming platforms and media today are quite a bit more extensive than something that could be played on older hardware. But that's not to say the best possible audio coming from an NES would be awful. In fact, through testing, 100th Coin found that while the audio file he had for Bad Apple was running at a 48 kHz audio sample rate, the best that he could get the NES to run was at 25 kHz. Which honestly is very surprising, given most of the audio you'd hear in games on the NES that wasn't music or sound effects would sound horrendous.
The Adventures of Fire Billy. What were they thinking with this load of
But in theory, this shouldn't sound too bad. Yeah, okay, it does sound kinda bad. But why does it sound bad? Surely it should sound pretty good for coming out of an NES. But that's the thing. With the method used at this point, he'd have the game go back and forth between rendering frames of the video and outputting the raw audio data. With this back and forth, the NES would have a bit of a pause in between playing the sections of the audio, so this wouldn't really work. But that's where a stroke of genius occurred. What if a 100th coin had slipped in the code for sections of the audio while rendering the video frames? Theoretically, compared to a constant back and forth between video and audio, they could both be streamlined together to play smoothly. But that would take quite a bit more work. So much work, in fact, that he coded a custom NES emulator to help debug this process. By learning more about how the NES internals work, like the amount of cycles the CPU runs through, he was able to figure out the precise code that would need to be written to get the audio to not only play as optimally as it could, but also to keep it in sync throughout the entire music video. Without this step, it wouldn't have played nearly as smoothly as it does. It's amazing the things that people will think of, and how they're able to figure out a way to do it. Even with all this, there could be further improvements made. Heck, if you really wanted to, you could actually get color video to run, though it probably wouldn't look too good. So yeah, he got Doom running in Super Mario Bros. Technically. And while we're at it, I've also seen all your comments about running Doom in Super Mario World. And while that sounds interesting, I have no clue how to do that. I have asked some people who know a lot more about that than I do, and even they say it's quite a bit of a challenge. Cause see, trying to talk about the process is one thing, but actually trying to do it yourself, that's a whole other world that I know nothing about. Regardless, the process of getting a currently 40-year-old game to run a video from over 20 years after its inception, only to have the game pull a fake-out level transition to be Bowser in the end. Wait, how did this happen? To properly end the tool-assisted speedrun, 100th Coin wanted to have the game truly end by beating the last Bowser level. To do this, he'd have to get the game out of video playback mode. See, how the game would play the video back is by having it repeat a set of custom-coded instructions, and looping those instructions for every new frame of video and audio. Though because the game is stuck in a loop of these instructions, with no real end in sight, how do you get back to the normal game? Well, this is where 100th Coin had stealthily left in some code within this loop, so that if A is pressed during the point in the loop that a new video frame starts, it'll basically remove itself from the custom video playback mode, and then jump back into the custom coding mode instead. From here, another metric ton of inputs are made so that the game loads a new state, sort of like loading a save state, where Small Mario beats Bowser in World 8-4, thus saving the princess and beating the game. Arbitrary code execution will never not be insane to me, and with how creative people are with it now, I can only imagine what more they'd be able to do as time goes on and more optimizations are found. Huge thanks to 100th Coin for allowing me to cover his process of running videos in this classic game, and for proofreading the script. I'd highly recommend checking out his videos and channel, which I will leave links to in the description below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, share your thoughts in the comments below. But with that being said, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care and peace.